Chapter 15, Supply Chain Management. So the supply chain is the sequence of organizations, their facilities and functions and activities that are involved in producing and delivering a product or service. Logistics is the part of the supply chain involved with forward and reverse flow of goods, services, cash, and information. So here's a typical supply chain. So at the top there you have suppliers going into storage. It goes into manufacturing, goes into some storage, goes to a distributor, retailer, and then the customer. There's also sort of this sort of the short, maybe a service supply chain where you got a couple of suppliers going to storage, you do some service, give it to the customer. Then this is another view of the supply chain because you have cash flow and goods and services. So you have customers, marketing, product, service, design that goes in here. You got suppliers. So you have suppliers, you have cash going this way, and goods and services going this way. So it's a different way of looking at the supply chain. Facilities. So the sequence of the supply chains begins with the basic suppliers and extends all the way to the customer. So the facilities could be warehouses, factories, processing centers, distribution centers, retail outlets, and offices. So some of the functions and activities of the supply chain: forecasting, purchasing, inventory management, information management, quality assurance, scheduling, production and delivery, and customer service. Supply chain management is also known as SCM, supply chain management. Is the strategic coordination of business functions within a business organization throughout its supply chain for the purpose of integrating supply and demand management. So SCM managers are the people at various levels of the organization responsible for managing supply and demand both within and across business organizations. They are involved with planning and coordinating activities, source and procurement of materials and services, transformation activities, and logistics. So some of the key aspects of supply chain management: the goal is to match supply to demand as effectively and efficiently as possible. So here's some of the key issues. The first question is, how much should you outsource? A little bit or a lot? Managing your procurement. You've decided to outsource. Now you need to manage. How are you going to pick your, how do you procure this stuff? How do you manage your suppliers? How do you manage your customer relationships? And then the next question is, how do you quickly identify problems and respond to them? So there's three types of flow management. So there's product and service flow. So this is where the goods flow through. The second is information flow. This involves forecasts, sales data, transmitting orders, tracking systems, updating order status, and then financial flow. How does the money? What's the terms? What's the credit terms? Is it consignment? How do you transfer title? So let me just give you these examples in Chipotle. So the product and service flow, you start at the beginning of the line. And they put the lettuce or the burrito and the beans and rice and meat, or like I love sofritas, which is the tofu, and you go through that. So that's the product and service flow. The information flow, um, as far as from the customer, you are actually telling them you are going with your bowl of your. I like to get the salad. So my bowl of salad, I am telling them as I'm going through the system what I want in there. And then the financial flow is when one of the it always happens at the guacamole. You know, I say I want some guacamole, and they say before they put the guacamole on, they say, um, you know, it's extra, right? You know, they're going to charge extra for the guacamole, and yes, I want to pay extra. And then, so that's a little bit of financial flow, is because they're verifying the cost. Then you get down to the end, and that's where you actually pay for it. So those are the visible parts of Chipotle. But then behind that, that the customer doesn't see, is you have the people in the back who are chopping, you know, making the guacamole, making the rice, making the beans, um, uh, broiling the meat, cutting the lettuce. All of those things are happening. As far as information flow, you see one of the servers says, I need more rice, I need more guacamole. And then beyond that, someone somewhere is deciding how much, how many avocados to order, how many, you know, how much meat to order, how much rice to order for tomorrow, for next week, next month. So the product comes in a truck, but they're having to make that information flow, and then there's the financial flow, paying for all those services up front. So there's some trends in supply chain management. One of them is to measure the return on investment of the supply chain. The second is the greening of the supply chain. You know, how do you make your supply chain more environmentally friendly? The other is reevaluating outsourcing. So outsourcing was really popular for a while, and now some people are actually pulling that outsource piece back in-house. Integrating information technology, adopting lean principles, and then managing risks. So there's benefits and risks of outsourcing. One of the benefits is lower prices from lower labor costs. So especially if you outsource to China, where the labor costs might be lower than in the U.S. So that's a benefit of outsourcing. The ability of the organization to focus on its core strengths. So if you're trying to figure out how to manufacture things when you're really good at selling things, maybe you should outsource the manufacturing. Your core strength is selling. And it permits the conversion of some fixed costs into variable costs. So if you need to manufacture stuff rather than buying machines, you outsource that to a company that already has the machines, and they just put your piece of it, and they just build for you. And now you order 10 or 100 or 1,000, as opposed to remember where we were trying to determine capacity and how big a capacity you need for manufacturing. Well, if you go you know, outsource that manufacturing, you don't have to worry about that so much. You could overwhelm a supplier, and it becomes a problem there. Free up capital. So if you're not having to make these big fixed cost investments, you could put that for other needs. And then risk can be shifted to the supplier. So you know, that risk of buying that capital equipment, that risk of the quality risk, you know, a lot of that can be the supplier's problem. And take advantage of the supplier's expertise. The supplier could be very good at that, and you're not very good at it. It also makes it easier to expand outside your home country. So if you outsource to someone, and an interesting example of this is Boeing aircraft. So if you look at an aircraft, the avionics might be built in one country, A wing might be built in another country. The seats may be built somewhere else. And what they're doing is they're getting that country to buy their airplane. They're like, if you buy 10 of these airplanes from me, I'll build all of the avionics in your country. So it starts making it easier. And if you outsource, another example is if you outsource the retail side of things to a company that's already in that country, it may be easier for them to sell your product than for you to sell it. Risks. So there's always risks. Inflexibility due to longer lead times. If you're buying your products by the container full from China, and it takes 6 weeks for that container to arrive, it comes in container loads and it takes 6 weeks. Increased transportation costs. You have to pay for that. And there's that whole language cultural difference thing. What means one thing here may mean something totally different there, and you could get your wires crossed and people don't understand what you're talking about, become offended. The whole loss of jobs, people could lose their jobs and in your company. Loss of control, and this can be especially important with proprietary information, patented information. If you go outsource your trade secrets, if you look at a lot of these cheap imitations are actually built in the same factory as the original, and they're just like, yeah, we'll build some for your competition too, and may ignore some of the patent rights and stuff. Lower productivity, you could deal with that with outsourcing. Loss of business knowledge, it's the same idea of the loss of control. Not only could you lose your trade secrets, but you may not even know what they are. You forgot how to build this. It's all outsourced. The transfer of knowledge and intellectual property, I mentioned that. And then it's harder to manage the supply chain when it's outsourced. You may be having to fly to China every other week just to try to keep things in line. Some other supply chain risk, supply chain disruption. So natural disasters, supplier problems. Another risk is quality issues. So you could have issues with recalls, liability claims, negative publicity, loss of control of sensitive information. All of those are risks. So risk management. There's different ways to deal with risks. So the strategies, you could avoid risk, reduce risk, or share risk. Some of the key elements of successful risk management are to know your suppliers, provide supply chain visibility, and develop an event response capability. Global supply chains. So product design often uses inputs from around the world. Some manufacturing and service activities are outsourced to countries where labor or material costs are lower and products are sold globally. So some of the complexities of this, you got language and cultural difference, currency fluctuations, political instability, increasing transportation costs and lead times, and increased need for trust among supply chain partners. So there's also ethical issues. So one of the examples is bribing government or company officials to secure permits or favorable status. So here in the U.S., this is illegal, where in some other countries, it's just the way things get done. Another is this whole concept of exporting smokestacks to developing countries. In other words, I'm not burning greenhouse gases here, but that those same greenhouse gases are happening in China. Another is claiming a green supply chain when the level of green is only minimal. So you say, oh yeah, we don't create any pollution, it's just that our supplier does. Ignoring health, safety, environmental standards. So something that you would never do here, you're perfectly willing to let your supplier hurt people. A great example of that is the iPhone, and the contractor that that builds iPhones, and the suicide rate of employees. It was so bad they installed nets in the housing because people were jumping jumping out of their windows trying to kill themselves. So they made nets so they wouldn't kill themselves. I mean, some of those kinds of things. Basic worker rights. The whole thing where there was a riot in one of the Apple factories. And then mislabeling the country of origin. Where you say made in the U.S. when it's really made in China. And then selling products abroad that are banned at home. And then dealing with ethical issues. So you work to develop an ethical supply chain code of behavior, you monitor supply chain activities, choose suppliers that have a reputation for good ethical behavior, incorporate compliance with labor standards in supplier contracts, and address any ethical problems that arise swiftly. Small business concerns. There's several concerns. One of them, when you're dealing with a small business, is inventory management. So a small business may not be able to carry as much inventory as a large business, and you could have shortages. So one option is to have backups for delivery from suppliers to customers. So you're working with small business A, maybe you have a different small business, or maybe a large business as a backup. So you have a contract with both of them, and if for some reason the small business falls on their face, you have a contract with a larger business to may cost you a little bit more to fill in the slack. So some ways of reducing risks with small business is you use reliable suppliers. You determine which suppliers are critical and get to know them and any challenges they have. So this is I love the term MBWA, manage by wandering around. So you actually go visit the suppliers, get to know them, find out what they're worried about, and figure out how you can actually help them. Measure supplier performance, and then look for, you recognize the warning signs of supplier issues, and you really have plans in place to manage supply chain problems. And then the third is international trade. You work with someone who has the expertise to help oversee foreign suppliers, set expectations for demand and timing, do not rely on a single supplier, build goodwill to help in negotiations and resolve any problems when they arise, and consider using domestic suppliers if the risks of working with foreign suppliers are prohibitive. So there's several management responsibilities. One of them is legal. Knowledgeable about the laws and regulations, obeying the laws and conforming to regulations. Another is economic responsibility. supplying products and services to meet demand as efficiently as possible, and then the ethical, conducting business in ways that are consistent with moral standards of society. So here's some strategic management responsibility. So one of them is supply chain strategy alignment, network configuration, information technology, products and services, capacity planning, strategic partnerships, distribution strategy, uncertainty, and risk reduction. So there's management has responsibility for sort of tactical planning and operational planning. So tactical includes forecasting, sourcing, operations planning, managing inventory, transportation planning, collaborating. And then the operational is that scheduling, receiving, transforming, order filling, managing inventory, shipping, information sharing, and controlling. So procurement, you can think of it as just the purchasing department, which is responsible for obtaining materials, parts, supplies needed for a product or service. So the goal of procurement is develop and implement purchasing plans for products and services that support the operations strategy. So here's some of the purchasing interfaces. So you have a purchasing department that works with suppliers, but then the purchasing department works inside your company with the operations, with legal, accounting, data processing, design, and receiving. So here's some duties of the purchasing department. Identify the sources of supply, negotiate contracts, maintain a database of suppliers, obtaining goods and services, and managing the suppliers. So the purchase cycle, purchasing receives a requisition, they select a supplier, place the order, monitor the order, receive the goods. Supplier management. So supplier management is choosing suppliers, supplier audit, supplier certification, supplier relationship management, and supplier partnerships. So one of the ways you can have supplier partnerships is collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. And you can also have strategic partnering. So then there's vendor analysis, supplier audits, and supplier certification. So vendor analysis is really evaluating the sources of supply in terms of price, quality, reputation, and service. So sometimes this might be called, in the government, we might call this source selection, or the technical evaluation, the cost evaluation. Supplier audit. This is how you determine the capabilities, any problems, the resolution, and other criteria of, will the supplier actually do what they say they're going to do? And then certification. So this is really an examination of the supplier's policy and capabilities, and it's a process that the supplier meets or exceeds the requirements of the buyer. So the relationships are really determined by the trading relationship. So if you have a short-term relationship, this is often like competitive bidding with minimal interaction. The medium term is sort of an ongoing relationship, and the long term is greater cooperation and really can evolve into a partnership. So strategic partnering is when two or more organizations have complementary products and services joined to realize a strategic benefit. So an example is a supplier agrees to hold inventory for a customer in return for a long-term commitment. So the customer's inventory holding cost is reduced and the supplier is relieved of costs that would be needed to continually find new customers. So here is sort of contrasting supplier relationship. So here the aspect, the adversary, and partner. So the number of suppliers. So when you have many suppliers, you tend to have an adversary relationship where you play one against the other. Where if you only have one or a few, the partnership may work. The length of the relationship. So a short relationship may be more adversarial, and a long term is more like a partner. Low price. So if low price is a major consideration, then it tends to be more adversarial, where if it's only moderately important, then a partnership may be more appropriate. Reliability. So if you don't care about reliability, then adversary may be better. If you care about reliability, then a partnership is more appropriate. Openness, sharing of information. Adversarial, there's low openness, where partnership, there's high openness. Quality. So in an adversarial relationship, the quality may be unreliable and the buyer inspects. In a partnership, quality is often at the source and the vendor certifies quality. The volume of the business. So if the volume of business with that specific supplier, in the case of adversary, that may be low. In the case of partner, it could be high. Flexibility. Adversary, you have relatively low flexibility, but with a partnership, you have relatively high flexibility. Location. Adversary, it's widely dispersed. Partnership, you might want it to be near the supplier for short lead times and quick service. Logistics is really the movement of materials, services, cash, and information. So you have movements within a facility, incoming shipments, outgoing shipments. So this is an example where you have receiving here, it comes into storage, and it goes through these workstations to storage, workstations out here to shipping. So this has a nice flow through it. If you look at some places, this may, if it doesn't have a good flow, you might go from here to here to here to here to here to all over the place. But in this case, you see how it's set up for a nice flow through the facility. Incoming and outgoing shipments. So traffic management really manages the shipment of incoming and outgoing goods. So there's costs of shipping alternatives, government regulations, needs of the organization, shipping delays or disruptions. RFID, I mentioned this once before, RFID is really a technology that uses radio waves to identify objects. It's similar to barcodes, but you don't have to have line of sight. So you could just open up a sea container, point an RFID gun in there, and get a complete inventory of everything that's in that sea container, assuming each item had an RFID. So you have increased supply chain visibility, improved inventory management, improved quality control, and enhanced relationships with suppliers and customers. And there's a little YouTube video it sort of brings up some interesting information about RFID. Third-party logistics. So this is where you're outsourcing logistic management, including warehouse and distribution. And the potential benefits includes taking advantage of specialist knowledge, their well-developed information system, and ability to obtain more favorable shipping rates. So Federal Express is one place where they've sort of grabbed logistics management as an additional product that they offer. Managing returns. So this is what you might consider reverse logistics. So someone's not happy, they send it back. So one option is you have your returns to companies or third-party handlers for a variety of reasons. One of them is gatekeeping, so you screen the return goods to prevent incorrect acceptance of goods. And then avoidance, finding ways to minimize the number of items that are returned. Okay, so an effective supply chain begins with strategic sourcing. So you analyze the procurement process to lower cost. By reducing waste and non-value added activities, you increase products, reduce risks, and improve supplier performance. So, for strategic sourcing, you have to have trust, effective communication, information velocity. Everybody needs to know information as soon as possible. Supply chain visibility. Everybody needs to see what's going on. Event management capability and performance metrics. So there's some challenges. There's barriers to integration of the organizations. There's a challenge of getting top management on board. Dealing with trade-offs, small businesses, variability and uncertainty, and response time. So here's some of the trade-offs. Lot size inventory trade-offs. So if you got a big lot size, you can get discounts for quantity, lower setup cost, all of those, but it increases the amount of stock that you need to carry, so your inventory carrying costs increase. You have the inventory transportation cost trade-off. So suppliers like to ship full truckloads of stuff as opposed to partial truckloads. That means that goes in favor of large inventory lot size. And then cross-decking. This is a technique where goods arrive at a warehouse from a supplier, are unloaded from the supplier's truck and loaded onto an outbound truck, thereby avoiding warehouse storage. You actually see this a lot of times at a small, like a UPS store, where it's just like all the trucks are backing into this thing and they're just moving stuff from truck to truck, and that's it. You know, comes in on one truck and it doesn't go anywhere except onto the next truck. Lead time transportation cost trade-off. So once again, full truck versus a partial truck. So do you wait for a full truck? That means that the customers are waiting. Product inventory trade-off. So, you know, how much inventory variety are you going to have? So if you have a lot of variety with small lot sizes for the same thing. And then delayed differentiation. We talked about this a little bit, where you could have standard assemblies that are then put together. So this would be real easy to do with computers. So you have a bunch of hard disks, a bunch of screens, different sizes of CPU, different sizes of keyboards, and then they're all there, And then when a customer says, I want one of these, you put it together and give it to them rather than having all the combinations and variations of computers in stock. So that's an example of delayed differentiation. Cost customer service trade-off. So, so shipping large lots reduces cost but increases lead time. Then there's this disintermediation. So this is by reducing one or more steps in the supply chain by cutting out intermediaries. So a great example of this is you see this factory direct warehouse. So you get the furniture that's factory direct. It's we have no middleman, so it's like a factory showroom where maybe they've cut out all the it's a one-step supply chain where this is the factory and this is and here's the showroom immediately there. So here's a summary. We talked about the trends in supply chain management, global supply chains, management responsibility, procurement, e-business, supplier management, inventory management, order fulfillment, logistics, and creating an effective supply chain.